The air in the subway station was a thick, soupy mix of humid summer heat, stale urine, and the metallic tang of ozone. It pressed against my skin, a physical weight that made the simple act of breathing a chore. I, Eleanor Vance, 65 years young and a lifetime removed from the gentle, honeysuckle-scented breezes of my Knoxville garden, felt a profound and aching weariness in my bones. It was a weariness that went deeper than the fatigue of a long day shopping with my daughter. It was a soul-deep exhaustion from the constant, low-grade tension that had hummed between my son-in-law and me for the better part of a week. "You sure you're okay to take the subway, Mom?" Sarah had asked, her brow furrowed with concern. We were standing outside the Whole Foods on Union Square, plastic bags digging into our palms. "We can just get an Uber." "Don't be silly, sweetheart," I'd said, forcing a brightness I didn't feel. "It's just a few stops. I'm not made of glass." It was David who had chimed in, his voice a smooth, polished baritone that always set my teeth on edge. "Let her be, Sarah. Your mother's a tough old bird." He'd smiled then, a flash of perfect whitened teeth, but his eyes, the color of a shallow sea, remained cold and assessing. "Aren't you, Eleanor?" "Tough as a hickory nut," I'd replied, meeting his gaze squarely. It was a game we played, a subtle fencing match, where the points were scored in micro-expressions and loaded pleasantries. Now, descending into the bowels of the 14th Street station, I regretted my pride. The noise was a physical assault, a screeching, rumbling, echoing cacophony that seemed to vibrate up through the soles of my sensible shoes. A train was approaching, its single headlight cutting through the grimy semi-darkness of the downtown 4-track. The crowd surged forward, a single organism driven by the collective desire to get home. David was right behind me, so close I could smell his expensive cologne, a sharp, citrusy scent that fought a losing battle against the station's funk. Sarah was a few paces ahead, distracted by a text on her phone. "Watch your step, Eleanor," David said, his voice low, meant only for my ears. There was no kindness in it. It was a command. I shifted my grocery bag, the one containing the artisanal olive bread and the aged brie Sarah loved but would never buy for herself. I'd spent 40 years teaching high school history in Tennessee, molding young minds, commanding classrooms of rowdy teenagers. I knew a bully when I saw one. David wasn't a loud, fist-shaking bully. He was the quiet, insidious kind, the one who eroded your confidence with condescension and masked his contempt in a thin veneer of civility. The train was closer now, a roaring, graffiti-streaked behemoth. The wind of its passage whipped at my neatly styled gray hair and tugged at my light summer cardigan. The crowd pressed in, a wall of impatient humanity. And then it happened. Not a jostle from the crowd, not a stumble from my own tired feet. It was a precise, powerful, two-handed shove to the center of my back. My feet left the solid, gum-stained concrete. For a heart-stopping, surreal moment, I was airborne, suspended in the hot, gusty tunnel. My purse, a beautiful leather clutch Sarah had given me for my last birthday, flew from my grasp. Its contents, lipstick, a photo of my late husband Thomas, a tube of peppermints, exploded into the air like pathetic confetti. Time did that thing they say it does in moments of terror. It slowed to a thick, syrupy crawl. I had time to see the grill of the train, a monstrous metal face fill my entire field of vision. I had time to feel a profound, devastating sense of betrayal that was sharper than any physical fear. And I had time, just before I fell, to twist my neck and look back. I saw David. He wasn't lunging forward in a panicked attempt to grab me. He was standing perfectly still, his arms already back at his sides. His face was calm, eerily placid, bisected by a wicked, triumphant smile. His eyes, those cold sea-glass eyes, held a glint of pure, unadulterated malice. His words hissed like a serpent's promise, cut through the roaring din. "Just die already." Then I fell. The world became a violent, tilting blur of light and noise and pain. I didn't land on the tracks themselves, but in the narrow, filthy drainage trough between them. My left hip and shoulder connected with the cold, greasy steel of the railbed with a sickening crack that I felt more than I heard. A lightning bolt of agony shot through my entire body. The train screamed past inches from my face, a deafening, rushing wall of death. The wind tore at my clothes, trying to suck me under the wheels. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my face into the grime and gravel, praying to a God I hadn't spoken to since Thomas lost his battle with cancer. Sarah. Her name was a prayer, a talisman. I thought of her laugh, so like her father's, a sound that could brighten the gloomiest Tennessee day. I thought of her small hand in mine when she was a child, learning to walk. I thought of my garden, the rich, dark earth between my fingers, the patient, quiet cycle of life and growth. I would not die here, not in this dark, God-forsaken hole, not like this, not by his hand. The train's brakes engaged with a deafening metallic shriek that felt like it was shredding my eardrums. The force of its deceleration vibrated through the ground, rattling my broken bones. It finally ground to a halt, several cars down, and a sudden and profound silence fell, broken only by the hiss of pneumatics and the frantic, ragged sound of my own breathing. From above, voices erupted, a panicked chorus. "Oh my God, someone fell! Call 911! Is she alive, lady? Are you okay?" A young man with a scruffy beard and a knitted beanie, his face pale as parchment, jumped down onto the tracks, his movements careful but urgent. "Ma'am, don't move. Just stay still. Help is coming." I looked up at him, my vision swimming in and out of focus. The concerned face of the stranger was a lifeline thrown into my personal hell. I tried to speak, but my throat was a desert. I coughed, tasting blood and dirt. "My son-in-law," I finally rasped, the words scraping their way out. "His name is David Miller. He pushed me." The young man's eyes widened in horror. He looked up at the crowd on the platform, a sea of shocked faces. "Did anyone see that? Did anyone see a man push her?" But the crowd was a blur. No one answered. They had seen a fall, not a murder. The next hour was a disjointed montage of pain and procedure. Gentle-handed paramedics strapped me to a backboard, their voices calm and reassuring as they lifted me from the trench that had been my salvation. The whirl of the ambulance's siren was a strange, electronic lullaby. In the stark, bright lights of the ER, amidst the flurry of X-rays and the prick of IVs, I gave my statement again and again, my voice growing stronger, more insistent with each repetition. "David Miller, my son-in-law. He was standing right behind me. He smiled. He said, 'Just die already,' and he pushed me. It was intentional." The police detectives who came to my bedside were a study in contrasts. Detective Miller, no relation, he assured me with a tired smile, was a large, weary-looking man in his 50s, his suit rumpled. His partner, Detective Alvarez, was younger, sharper, her eyes missing nothing. "We've pulled the security footage from the station, Mrs. Vance," Alvarez said, her voice calm and professional. We're reviewing it now. We've also made contact with your daughter and Mr. Miller. They're on their way to the hospital." A cold dread, separate from the pain in my body, settled in my stomach. Sarah, how would she take this? The phone call was the hardest thing I have ever had to do. "Mom?" Her voice was thick with tears, hysterical. "The police called David. He's a wreck. He said it was so crowded that there was a surge, that you lost your balance, and he tried to grab you, but it was too late." "Sarah, honey," I interrupted her, my voice steady, a rock in the torrent of her grief and confusion. "I did not fall. David pushed me." The silence on the other end was absolute, a void of disbelief. I could picture her, in their sleek, minimalist Brooklyn apartment, the one David's Wall Street salary paid for, her hand flying to her mouth. My Sarah, with her kind and trusting heart and her desperate, lifelong need to see the good in everyone. "Mom, no," she whispered, the word a plea. That's insane. Why would you say that? David loves you. He's devastated. He's crying." "He told me to die, Sarah." He smiled while he did it. I took a shallow breath, the pain from my fractured collarbone a sharp, clarifying sting. "The police have the security footage. They will see the truth." She broke then. Great, racking sobs that tore at my heart. "I'm coming to the hospital. We'll figure this out. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake." But I wasn't confused. The morphine drip softened the edges of the physical pain, but the memory of that wicked smile was etched into my mind with acid clarity. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of panic. It was calculated, cold. And as I lay in that sterile white bed, the pieces began to fall into place with a dreadful, logical precision. David had never liked me. I was a relic, a reminder of Sarah's life before him, a life of porch swings and church potlucks, not the frantic, status-obsessed world of high finance he inhabited. He tolerated my annual visits, but I always felt his impatience, his thinly veiled contempt for my quaint Southern manners and my lack of interest in hedge funds and real estate valuations. The real tension, however, had started 6 months ago. Sarah, ever the planner, had convinced me it was time to update my will. Thomas's life insurance and the eventual sale of our comfortable 3-bedroom house in Knoxville had left me with a modest but secure nest egg. One evening, over a dinner that David had barely touched, I'd laid out my plans. The bulk of the estate and the family pieces, my mother's sapphire necklace, your father's gold pocket watch, will go to you, Sarah. But I've also set up a small trust for any future grandchildren, for their education. I'll be the sole trustee until they're 25. Sarah had teared up, leaning over to hug me. "Oh, Mom, that's wonderful. So thoughtful." David had been unnaturally quiet. He'd taken a slow sip of his expensive Cabernet, his expression unreadable. Later, while I was helping with the dishes, I'd overheard them arguing in the kitchen, their voices low and tense. "It's controlling, Sarah," he hissed. "That money should be ours, free and clear. What if we need it for a down payment on a bigger place in the Heights? What if I want to invest it in this new fund my firm is launching? It's our capital, tied up in some bureaucratic trust." "It's for our children, David," she had replied, her voice pleading. "It's Mom's way of making sure they're taken care of no matter what." "We can take care of our own children," he snapped, the veneer of civility cracking. "I don't need your mother playing banker from beyond the grave. It's an insult." That was it. The motive. It wasn't just that he saw me as a nuisance. He saw me as an obstacle, a lock on a box of money he believed was rightfully his. With me gone, Sarah, vulnerable and drowning in grief, would be putty in his hands. He could convince her to dissolve the trust, sell the heirlooms, and funnel the cash into his ambitions, into his image of a perfect life. He hadn't just tried to kill an old woman. He had tried to kill a trustee. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My body was a tapestry of purple and yellow bruises. My left arm was in a sling to immobilize my collarbone, and I walked with a pronounced limp. Sarah came to pick me up, her face a haunted mask of conflict, pale with dark circles under her eyes, her love for me warring with a desperate, defensive loyalty to her husband. "He's out on bail, Mom," she said quietly in the taxi, not meeting my eyes. "His firm posted it. He says the video is misleading. He says he was reaching for you, trying to pull you back from the edge when the crowd surged. He's devastated that you could think that." I didn't argue. I just looked out the window at the streaming, anonymous lights of New York. The city that promised my daughter so much now felt like a dangerous, alien labyrinth. "I'll be staying in a hotel, Sarah."
"Mom, no," she cried, her voice breaking. "You'll come stay with me. I'll take care of you. Please." I turned to her, placing my good hand over hers. "Sweetheart, the man who tried to kill me is in your apartment. However you choose to interpret what happened, that is a fact I cannot ignore. I will not set foot in that place until this is resolved." Tears welled in her eyes and spilled over. "He's my husband, and I'm your mother." My voice was soft, but as firm as the Appalachian bedrock I came from. "And I'm still here." I checked into a modest, clean hotel in Midtown. The room was impersonal, a box with a view of another brick wall, but it was my sanctuary. My body was broken, but my mind was sharper, clearer, and colder than it had been in years. The gentle, accommodating Tennessee grandmother, the one who baked pies and tended her roses, had been burned away in the hot wind of the subway tunnel. In her place was a woman forged from steel and cold fury. David had chosen the wrong old lady to mess with. My revenge would not be a dramatic, illegal act. It would not be violence. It would be a quiet, meticulous, and total annihilation built piece by damning piece. I would ruin him with the truth. My first call was to an old student of mine, Benjamin Carter. Ben had been a troublemaker in my 10th grade American history class, all restless energy and a brilliant, subversive knack for finding loopholes in any system. I'd seen past the defiance to his sharp mind, channeling his mischief into a passion for debate and critical thinking. He was now one of the most respected and discreet private investigators in New York. "Ms. V," he said, his voice warm with surprise and immediate concern. "I saw the news. My God, are you okay?" "I will be, Ben, but I need your help." I didn't mince words. "I need you to dig into David Miller. Everything. His finances, his past, any affairs, any skeletons. I have a feeling my attempted murder wasn't his first sin, just his most ambitious." Ben was silent for a moment, the professional weighing the personal. "You think this was premeditated, not just a moment of rage?" "I know it was," I said, my voice flat. "The trust fund for my future grandchildren was a thorn in his side. He saw my death as a financial transaction. Find me the rest of the thorns. Find me the whole damn rose bush." While Ben worked his magic, I began my own investigation. I reached out to the formidable network of women in my life, my bridge club back in Knoxville, my old colleagues from the school. They were a legion of silver-haired warriors armed with internet sleuthing skills, a deep knowledge of human nature, and a righteous, burning indignation on my behalf. One of them, Martha, a whiz with genealogy websites and public records, found something very interesting within 48 hours. David's mother, whom he claimed had died of cancer when he was 12, was very much alive and living in a modest, somewhat dilapidated trailer park outside Scranton, Pennsylvania. Next, I hired a forensic accountant, paid for by cashing in a CD I'd been saving for a rainy day. The report that landed in my inbox a week later was a masterpiece of financial damnation. David was drowning, not in the kind of respectable debt like a mortgage, but in a quicksand of his own making. Six-figure credit card balances from luxury stores and restaurants, massive margin calls on leveraged stock investments that had gone sour, and a secret, high-interest line of credit he'd taken out against their apartment, which was in Sarah's name as well. Sarah's name was not on any of the destructive debt. He had systematically isolated her from the financial reality of their lives. He was a house of cards, and my death was the only win strong enough to keep his fragile empire from collapsing. But the final, most gut-wrenching piece came from Ben. He met me in the quiet corner of my hotel's lobby, his expression uncharacteristically grim. "You were right, Ms. V," he said, sliding a plain manila folder across the table. "David has a girlfriend, a 26-year-old junior associate at his firm. They've been seeing each other for over a year. Expensive dinners at Daniel, weekend trips to the Hamptons, a suite at the Plaza for her birthday, all charged to his secret Amex." He paused, letting the sordid details hang in the air. "His name is Chloe." He opened the folder. There were photos. David and a young, willowy blonde laughing on the deck of a sailboat, their arms wrapped around each other. Another of them feeding each other oysters at a candlelit table. My sweet Sarah, who thought they were saving for the future, who bought her clothes from thrift stores and packed David's lunch every day to cut costs, while he wined and dined this girl with money he stole from their future. My hand trembled as I closed the folder. The betrayal was so vast, so profound, it felt like a physical blow. "And there's more," then continued, his voice low. "I did a deep dive into his undergraduate years at Vanderbilt. There was an incident his sophomore year. A female student, a freshman, accused him of sexual assault at a fraternity party. It never went to trial. The girl's family was persuaded to settle out of court for a significant sum, and the university records were sealed. David's father, a big-shot personal injury lawyer from Chattanooga with political connections, made it all go away, swept it under the rug like it never happened." I had everything I needed now. The weapon wasn't a gun or a knife. It was information. It was the truth. I invited Sarah to my hotel for tea. She came, looking thin and haunted, the light in her eyes dimmed. The chasm between us felt wider than ever. "Sarah, I love you more than anything in this world. You are my heart. What I'm about to show you will hurt you more deeply than anything ever has. It will shatter the world you think you live in. But you need to see it. You need to see the man you married for who he truly is." One by one, like placing cards in a game of solitaire that would determine our future, I laid the documents on the coffee table. First, the forensic accountant report. I pointed to the lines showing the secret credit cards, the massive debts. "This is why he needed my money. He's bankrupt. He's been lying to you." Her face was skeptical at first, then confused as she began to understand the columns of numbers. This can't be right. We have a joint account. It's always tight, but he said it was because of my student loans."
Next, the photos from Ben. I slid them out of the folder. The color drained from her face. She stared at the image of David and Chloe on the sailboat, her mouth a little O of shock. She picked it up, her fingers trembling violently. She didn't speak. She just stared, as if trying to reconcile the image with the reality she knew. Then the bank statements showing the monthly automated payments to an Ethel Miller in Scranton. His mother, Sarah, she's not dead. He pays her $500 a month to stay away, to stay quiet. He's ashamed of her. Finally, I placed the heaviest document on top, the redacted, but still decipherable settlement agreement and the accompanying confidential memo from Vanderbilt. I had highlighted the relevant parts. Sarah read it slowly, once, then twice. Her breath hitched. When she looked up at me, her eyes were wide with a horror I had never seen before, a fundamental shattering of her soul. "No," she whispered, the word a broken, desolate sound. She shoved the photo of David and Chloe away as if it had burned her. This can't be. It's a lie. It's all a lie." She was hyperventilating now, great gasping sobs. He assaulted someone?" "The police have the security footage from the subway, Sarah. He pushed me. He tried to kill me. Not because he momentarily lost his mind, but because I was the final, immovable obstacle to his financial salvation. He was going to use my death to get his hands on my money, your money, to pay for his double life, to fund the persona he's built for himself and for that girl." She looked at the photo again, and her face crumpled. The last vestiges of her denial evaporated, replaced by a raw, gut-wrenching pain. "All this time, he told me we were a team, that we were building a life together. I've been clipping coupons. I haven't bought a new coat in 3 years." The sheer, mundane cruelty of that final betrayal seemed to break her completely. The man she loved had not only tried to kill her mother, he had made a fool of her. "He is a sociopath, my darling," I said gently, moving to sit beside her and wrapping my good arm around her shaking shoulders. "And he needs to be stopped, not just for me, for you, for that girl at Vanderbilt, for any woman who might cross his path in the future." The transformation in Sarah over the next 24 hours was terrifying and magnificent to behold. The grief-stricken, confused wife was gone, replaced by a woman of pure, cold wrath. She went back to their apartment. I don't know what she said to David, whether she confronted him with the affair, the debt, or the assault, but Ben, who had a man discreetly watching the building, reported that David was seen leaving an hour later, dragging a suitcase, his face a thundercloud of fury and panic. She then went straight to the district attorney's office. She provided them with all the evidence we had gathered, the financial records, the proof of his affair, the evidence of his abandoned mother, and, most damningly, the Vanderbilt settlement. It painted a devastating portrait of a man with a history of predation, a powerful and clear financial motive, and a cold-hearted, calculated willingness to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. The criminal case against him transformed overnight. It was no longer just a he said, she said attempted murder case based on a grainy video. It was now a case about character, pattern, and premeditation. The DA, armed with this new arsenal, added charges of attempted aggravated assault and reckless endangerment and began building a narrative of a habitual predator for whom violence was a tool. But the true ruin, the complete and utter annihilation of David Miller, was happening in the brutal, merciless court of public opinion. I decided to speak. I gave an exclusive, carefully negotiated interview to a renowned, respected journalist from a major newspaper. I didn't play the role of the hysterical, grieving victim. I was Eleanor Vance, the retired history teacher from Tennessee. I was calm, measured, and devastatingly precise. I spoke of Thomas, of our life together, of the quiet pride I took in my garden. I spoke of Sarah, of my love for her, of my joy in seeing her build a life in this big, intimidating city. And then, with a quiet dignity that made the horror of it all even more potent, I described the moment on the platform, the smell of the air, the roar of the train, and the wicked smile. I never mentioned the Vanderbilt case by name. The settlement's confidentiality clause was a legal minefield, but I carefully alluded to a pattern of predatory behavior in his past that made this violent act not just believable, but inevitable. I spoke of his hidden debts, his secret life. I made it clear this was not about a family dispute. It was about a dangerous man being exposed. The story exploded. The subway son-in-law, the Tennessee grandma's revenge, smile of a killer. His name and face were splashed across the front page of every major newspaper and led every cable news broadcast. The online comment sections were a digital bloodbath. His firm, Sterling and Crest, facing a public relations nightmare of epic proportions and a flurry of concerned calls from major clients, fired him by email before the day was out. His so-called friends, the shallow social climbing set he had worked so hard to impress, dropped him instantly. His phone, I was told, went dead silent. Chloe, the girlfriend, seeing her own future and reputation going down with his ship, gave a tearful, self-serving interview to a tabloid show claiming he had lied to her too, that she had no idea he was married. He was utterly and completely exposed, stripped of his job, his status, his friends, and his mistress. The meticulously constructed life of David Miller was revealed to be a Potemkin village, and I had lit the match. The final crushing blow came from an unexpected source. The woman from the Vanderbilt case, emboldened by the very public unmasking of her attacker and the shifting cultural winds, came forward. She gave a full, on-the-record named account of her assault to the same journalist who had interviewed me. Her story was heartbreakingly, chillingly similar to the patterns we had uncovered. The charm, the manipulation, the entitlement, and the violence that lurked just beneath the surface. She was not just a footnote in a sealed document anymore. She was a living, breathing testament to his character. Facing a mountain of evidence, a shattered public persona, and a life that was in irrevocable tatters, his high-priced lawyer advised him to take a plea deal. The prospect of a trial, of having me, and now his Vanderbilt victim, testify against him in front of a jury was too great a risk. He pled guilty to attempted murder in the second degree. The sentencing hearing was a formality, but a necessary one. I was given the opportunity to make a victim impact statement. I dressed with care, a simple navy blue dress, a single string of pearls. I wanted to look like what I was, a respectable, wronged woman, a teacher, a mother. I stood before the judge, my back straight, my voice clear and steady in the hushed, wood-paneled courtroom. David sat at the defense table, wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, a far cry from the Brioni and Zedna he used to favor. The wicked, triumphant smile was long gone, replaced by a sullen, defeated mask. He refused to look at me, his gaze fixed on the table in front of him. "Your Honor," I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, "David Miller did not just try to kill my body that day on the subway platform. He tried to murder the trust between a mother and her daughter. He tried to extinguish the light of my family's future for his own selfish, hollow gain. He believed that at my age, my life was worth less than his comfort, less than his secrets, less than his ability to maintain a fraudulent facade of success. I turned and looked directly at Sarah, who sat in the front row, her back just as straight as mine, her eyes shining with tears, but also with a fierce, unwavering pride. But he failed. I turned back to the judge, my voice gaining strength. He underestimated the strength of an old woman from Tennessee. He forgot that we are made of tougher stuff. We know the value of family, of truth, and of justice. We know how to fight for what is right. He took me for a feeble, disposable sheep, but he pushed a wolf onto those tracks, and this wolf survived. I looked directly at David then, forced him with the power of my gaze to lift his eyes and meet mine. I saw the shock there, the fear, the utter bafflement that I, the quiet, unassuming mother-in-law, had been the instrument of his destruction. I do not hate this man, and I meant it. The fury had been burned away in the cold fire of my purpose, leaving behind only a crystalline clarity. I feel only pity for the hollow, miserable existence he has created for himself, an existence so empty that he believed the death of an old woman could fill it. I turned my final words to the judge. I ask that the court remove him from society for a very, very long time, so that he can never again threaten another woman, manipulate another soul, or betray another family's trust. The judge, a stern-faced woman, nodded slowly. She sentenced him to 25 years in a maximum security prison. He would be nearly 60 when he was eligible for release, a convicted felon, financially bankrupt, and utterly, completely alone. As the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs, the chains clinking a dull, metallic rhythm, he finally, fully looked at me. There was no smile, only a bottomless well of shock and terror and a dawning comprehension of the totality of his loss. I held his gaze for a single, long, silent moment, my expression one of cold, unblinking victory. Then I turned my back on him forever. Sarah and I moved back to Tennessee together. We sold the soulless Brooklyn apartment, used the proceeds to pay off his secret debts, and started fresh. She filed for divorce, which was granted in record time. The first spring after our return, we were in my garden, our hands deep in the rich, dark soil, planting new seedlings, tomatoes, peppers, and a climbing rose bush against the back fence. The New York media eventually moved on to the next scandal, the next tragedy. But sometimes, in the deep quiet of a Tennessee night, I think of the rush of the train, the smell of the tracks, and that wicked, triumphant smile. The memory doesn't bring nightmares. It brings a reminder of my own strength. He thought he could erase me with a single violent push. Instead, he gave me the fiercest reason to fight I have ever known. He tried to end my story, but I simply turned the page and, with my daughter beside me, wrote a better, stronger, more peaceful ending. And in the quiet twilight, surrounded by the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth, listening to the contented hum of Sarah working at her easel on the porch, I know with a deep and abiding certainty that I won.